Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Fanfic Series 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto became the Forbidden Demon King and built a legendary harem with Hinata, Sakura, Tsunade, Konan, Tamari, Mei, Ino, Kurenai, Tenten, Kushina, Kyuubi and Alara. Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Uchiha Sasuke vs. Akado Yoroi. Everyone not participating in this fight, please head up to the balcony, Hayate instructed. As everyone left the stage, Kakashi appeared behind Sasuke and began to tell him not to use his Sharingan, and that he would have to step in if he did. Naruto, who had advanced hearing thanks to his demonic heritage, grinned as he watched Sasuke grit his teeth, clearly frustrated from being handicapped right from the get-go. 100 Ryu says Sasuke's gonna do something stupid now that does not have his Sharingan. I don't take sucker bets, Naruto-sama, came Kyuubi's voice. He could tell she was as amused as him, if not more so. Somewhere in Fire Country a busty blonde sneezed. As the match started, Kakashi appeared behind Naruto. The blonde felt as well as smelled his appearance with his enhanced senses, but didn't respond to the white-haired Jonin's presence, waiting instead for him to make the first move. Naruto did not even bother to look at the silver-haired man. Yes, Kakashi-san. Kakashi smiled at the blonde, and even though Naruto still couldn't see, rolled his eyes just knowing it was there. Ma Naruto, that's Kakashi-sensei to you. Naruto scoffed as he watched Sasuke being forced on the defensive as his opponent used some kind of chakra-draining ability. Frowning as his hidden Rinnegan eyes watched the chakra from Sasuke flow into the other genin, the blonde wondered if he could learn such a skill. However, he soon realized that Kakashi was waiting for him to say something, and so began speaking. No, the title sensei only goes to someone who actually teaches his students something. The only thing I learned from you was tree climbing and teamwork. At this the other Jonin looked at Kakashi in shock. Most of their teams had already finished water walking and were starting on some of the more advanced forms of chakra control. Naruto grinned as he decided to put the nail in the coffin. Not only did you teach me just that, but I know for a fact that you have also been giving private lessons to the Tem on how to use his Sharingan after our teamwork training sessions. Naruto put quotations in the air when he said teamwork. Turning back around to look at the battle, the blonde finished his small spiel. Frankly, until you actually teach me something substantial, you can forget me calling you sensei. Those who listened to Naruto's words couldn't help but be appalled that Kakashi had only gotten to tree climbing with his team, yet had privately trained Sasuke. Many people felt their respect for the copy ninja drop. Sarutobi, who also heard this, narrowed his eyes, promising to have a few words with Kakashi after the exams. Kakashi scowled under his mask. Sasuke needs to learn how to effectively use his Sharingan. And I needed to learn how to effectively fight. Period, Naruto said with a shrug. Unlike Sasuke, who was given preferential treatment at the academy and could rely on his clan scrolls, I have been forced to try and make do on my own in my ninja training. Hell, I wasn't even taught the correct stances for the basic academy taijutsu back at the academy. You could have helped with that, yet didn't. Naruto scowled as Sasuke used a move he had obviously copied from his spar with Lee before the beginning of the Chunin exams to defeat Yoroi. Though it was a greatly bastardized version. He had used the initial kick or the Omid Renge, Hidden Lotus, as well as the Kage Buyo, Shadow Dance's Leaf, to help set up his opponent for a reverse heel kick Sasuke called Shishi Renden, Lion's Barrage. Now if you're done, your pet looks like he needs help, Naruto said, pointing with his chin at where Sasuke fell on his back. Kakashi scowled, promising himself that this was not over as he sunshined body flicker to Sasuke, scooped him up, and took him to the hospital. Bet you 100 Ryu that Kakashi will give the Uchiha brat personalized training after this. Naruto gave Kyuubi a feral grin, even though she could not see it due to being hidden in his cloak. I don't take sucker bets. Somewhere in Fire Country a busty blonde-haired woman sneezed again, vowing to make whoever kept making her sneeze pay. Aburame Shino vs. Abume Zaku. Damn, I wanted to fight the Uchiha, Zaku grumbled as he walked down the stage. Despite the fact that both his arms were in a sling, the boy still somehow managed to exude an aura of arrogance. Now I have to fight some loser instead. Shino said nothing as he made his way to the arena floor. The match was over fairly quickly, and Shino was the victor. Not that it was surprising to Naruto as that the Odo Genin had been in no shape to participate in combat. Shino had of course given the Odo ninja a warning and a chance for Zaku to forfeit. But Zaku's arrogance had led to his downfall, though Naruto had been surprised when the Odo Genin had shown that he could use one of his arms. Of course, when Zaku had tried to use his Zankaha, Shino had simply used a Kariwimi replacement jutsu on a Mushi Bunshin bug clone. Eventually, the Odo Genin had been trapped between a wall of bugs and Shino, who had given him another chance to forfeit. Zaku had, of course, refused and tried to use both hands, but Shino had anticipated this and clogged the boy's wind holes with his bugs. The end result being both of Zaku's arms exploding, which, if the agonized screams of pain before the boy passed out were any indication, must have been incredibly painful, resulting in Shino's victory. As the medical ninja cleared Zaku from the field, Kakashi reappeared. Almost as soon as he did, Sakura began asking about her, Sasuke-kun. Naruto ignored her as well as the way Kakashi had tried to get his attention, and then tried drilling a hole through his head with a one-eyed glare when words didn't work. The man had never paid attention to him before, why should Naruto pay attention to him now? Sabaku no Kankura vs. Tsurugi Mitsumi. Naruto only paid a little attention to this battle as it was even shorter than Shino's. Masumi had the ability to dislocate and stretch his limbs, a Keke Genkai, Naruto assumed, which he had done at the very start of the battle and used them to wrap around Kankuro. The genin had threatened to break Kankuro's neck if he did not surrender, and of course he followed through when Kankuro refused. However, it turned out that Kankuro had been nothing more than a puppet and the real Kankuro had been hidden inside of the cloth on the puppet's back. Several kunai had appeared on various parts of the puppet's body, impaling Masumi as it squeezed him like a grape. The Konoha ninja had been dead before he hit the ground. Sabaku no Tamari vs. Higurashi Tenten. This battle was, unfortunately, much the same as the battle with Kankuro. It was a fairly one-sided fight with Tamari claiming victory. Tamari was a wind user, and the worst possible matchup for Tenten, who was a weapons user. No matter what she threw at Tamari, the fan-wielding Suna Kunoichi would merely blow it away via a wind jutsu. The blonde had even made a show of it, unraveling her fan to reveal a circle and telling Tenten that it was a star, and when all three were revealed she would lose. Tenten had scoffed at the girl. There was no way she would give up and had used a jutsu where she would jump in the air and unseal the contents of 2 storage seals, launching an assortment of weapons at the fan user. Naruto had to admit to being impressed at the sheer amount of ammunition the girl had locked up in her scrolls, as well as just what that ammunition was. He had seen everything from kunai and shuriken, to katanas, nodashis, scythes, kusarigama. Naruto had even caught a glimpse of a ball and chain somewhere in the mixed. None of them had landed. It had been at that moment that Tamari revealed herself to be a wind user and had launched all of the weapons away with a blast of wind from her fan, though Tenten had a trick up her sleeve and proved she wasn't quite finished. She had used chakra strings to lift the weapons back up and sent them flying at the sand-haired blonde. Only it had not worked. Tamari used another wind jutsu and sent all of the weapons sailing back towards the panda-haired girl. Tenten had gotten cut up with her own weapons and was nearly unconscious by the time she fell. Tamari had decided to show the girl who was superior by setting her fan down so Tenten would fall on it, likely doing some serious damage to her back. However, before Tenten could hit the fan, Naruto appeared on top of it, catching the weapon user in a bridal carry, one arm under her knees and the other around her shoulder. Many were utterly shocked with his speed, which they noticed was on par with Guy with his weights on. A few, namely Kakashi, couldn't help but wonder how Naruto got so fast. Or if this person really was Naruto, since he had never shown such speed before and couldn't come up with a way for the blonde to gain such power in so short a time. I do not think it is good sportsmanship to cause further damage to someone who was clearly defeated, Naruto said in a cold tone that left no room for debate. While he didn't particularly care for Tenten, seeing how he didn't even know her, she was still a Konoha shinobi. More importantly, such a blatant insult like what Tamari was going to do offended the blonde's sense of honor. Tamari gulped as Naruto's cold blue eyes bore into her. Something inside of her screamed that this boy was dangerous, and that crossing him would mean her death, no ifs, ands or buts. She hurriedly nodded and the odd sense of foreboding and dread that she had not even noticed welling up inside of her disappeared like an unknown weight that she had never known existed was suddenly lifted off her shoulders. Good, Naruto said, disappearing again. He reappeared a second later next to Guy and Lee, one who was looking at him in surprise and the other in surprise and eagerness. Naruto set Tenten down against the wall. Even in her weakened state, Tenten blushed. Having seen the blonde before he had covered himself up, as well as the fact that she had felt the blonde's ripped muscles when she had been pressed against him. Seeing that Tenten didn't have any permanent damage done to her, Naruto stood up. Giving a nod of acknowledgement to Guy, before he once again used his speed to appear before a shocked Kakashi. Guy-sensei, Lee said with tears in his eyes after Naruto left, that genin is so youthful, caring for our teammate like that. You were right, Lee. Guy proclaimed as he got in his nice guy pose, complete with thumbs up and glittering teeth. It was a rather horrible sight, and one that could only get worse with time as the bowl-cut jonin continued his tirade. His flames of youth burn brighter than 1,000 suns. I will strive to be just like Cloak-san and fan my own flames of youth. Lee shouted, bringing a fist up to his face, tears of joy and something undefined that managed to freak everyone around the boy streaming out of his bug-like eyes. And if I cannot do that, I shall run 200 laps around Konoha on my pinkies. Atta boy Lee, Guy shouted, and I will help stroke your flames of youth. If you cannot do that, I will climb the Hokage monument using nothing but my teeth. The geyser of tears running down Lee's eyes soon became a veritable waterfall as he stared at his sensei. Oh, Guy sensei. Lee, Guy sensei. Lee, Guy sensei. Lee. Soon enough, the two bowl-cut shinobi began to hug, a sunset backdrop of a beach complete with crashing waves appearing behind them as they did. The scene itself would have actually been quite beautiful, with the sunset painting the sky in a brilliant blaze of red and orange. Several sparse clouds were also lit up, their colors lighter than the sky, thin will-o-wisps that enhanced the already beautiful scene. That, combined with the waves of water that crashed against the rock and managed to catch the reflected light of the sun, created a scene of such marvelous and enchanting beauty that few could believe it was a genjutsu. However, that beauty was completely ruined by the two hugging in its midst. Many people screamed in terror as they felt their eyes begin to burn. Kurenai tried dispelling it, placing her hands in the release seal and trying to overpower it with her chakra, only to be shocked when it did not work. Why won't it dispel? She had never had a problem dispelling genjutsu before. Hell, she was renowned for her genjutsu, second only to Itachi, who had the benefit of his Sharingan eyes. Fortunately, before anyone could go into shock, or commit seppuku to spare themselves from the horror of being overexposed to the creepy sunset genjutsu and two man-hugging clones, the two were forced apart when a large blast of black energy was launched at them. Everyone turned and stared wide-eyed at Naruto, whose index finger was still smoking from the energy attack, glared at the pair with barely concealed rage. I have absolutely no problems with you guys doing that on your own time, but if I am present I suggest you cease such a disturbing ritual, lest I make sure this next shot doesn't miss. As if to prove his point, a black ball of energy appeared on the tip of his finger. Do I make myself clear? Naruto shouted in a tone that basically said, obey me or die, receiving two fearful nods from the self-proclaimed green beasts of Konoha. Naruto smirked under his mask as the energy dissipated. It was then he noticed everyone staring at him. What the hell are you people looking at? Naruto said. Everyone hurriedly looked away. Naruto smirked and nodded in satisfaction. What was that power? Wondered Sarutobi, along with nearly everyone else in the room. That was not Kyuubi's chakra, if anything it felt stronger, which shouldn't have been possible. I'm really going to have to speak with him after this. I wonder what that attack was. Kakashi asked himself, maybe I can get him to teach it to Sasuke. Mom was right, Sakura said to herself, Naruto Baka is a monster. Uzumaki Naruto, Gaara thought, why is mother afraid of you? Most thoughts that everyone else had were of a similar nature, though they varied from person to person. Naruto was more or less oblivious to these thoughts as he stared at the screen, waiting for the next match to begin. Yamanaka Ino vs Haruno Sakura. This was the most disappointing battle that Naruto had seen. The two girls had only used a mixture of basic academy jutsu and strategy that Iruka had taught them. Even worse, half of their time was spent talking about how they would win the heart of their Sasuke-kun. Surprisingly enough, the battle ended in Ino's victory, after she had managed to trap Sakura with her shintention and force the girl to give up. It was a disappointed Sakura and an ecstatic Ino that walked up to join everyone else. Man Kakashi, your student's battle was pathetic, Asuma muttered as he took a drag of his exaggerate. Didn't you teach that girl anything? Even though Ino trained less than everyone else on his squad, which was saying something considering he had a slacker and a boy who cared more about eating than training, he had still taught her some things. Kakashi scowled behind his mask, but didn't bother to reply as the next match started. Tsuchi-kin vs. Nara Shikamaru. Aw man, what a drag, Shikamaru groaned as he made his way downstairs. Why'd I have to face a woman? So you think that this is gonna be easy because I'm a woman? Kin questioned in an angry tone, already standing in the arena. Despite Shikamaru being some distance away, it was clear she had heard him perfectly. I didn't say that, troublesome woman, Shikamaru muttered in a lazy tone, making it obvious that he did not want to be there. At first Naruto did not pay much attention to the match, he had not thought there would be much to it. However, as the match continued, the blonde shinobi became more engrossed in it as he saw that Shikamaru, despite not being very strong, was an excellent strategist. The shadow using genin played a defensive role mostly, allowing Kin to show off and explain her technique with such meticulous detail that made the blonde roll his eyes. Why the hell someone would actually let someone know how an attack works was beyond him. Weren't ninjas supposed to be sneaky? Kin had launched several Senbon at Shikamaru for most of the match. Somewhere along the line she had launched two Senbon with bells attached to them, and used chakra strings so she could use their special ability. The bells had cast a genjutsu on Shikamaru, making him see more than one kin. However, Kin had forgotten something crucial after that. The shadow under the wires had been far too large for wires that were so as thin as the ones she was using. Had she noticed, she may have realized that Shikamaru had used his shadow possession jutsu in order to capture her. After that, all it took for the shadow user to win was a bluff and some shuriken, playing a game of chicken as he flipped back and she did the same, hitting her head against the wall. Uzumaki Naruto vs. Inuzuka Kiba. Alright, Kiba shouted in joy, it looks like we're getting the easy battle, Akamaru. Akamaru merely whimpered as Kiba jumped off the stands. While the boy had obviously not been paying attention to the past few minutes, or hadn't just disregarded how fast Naruto had been in the ball of energy he unleashed. It was obvious that Akamaru was not as blind as his master, and had no desire to fight. Naruto held in his smirk as he thought of the beatdown he would heap upon the arrogant dog using ninja and walked down the stairs at a sedate pace. Trying to prolong your defeat, dead last? Kiba asked with a smirk as Naruto made his way to the opposite end of the stage, his posture lazy. Hardly, Naruto said with a chuckle. I merely wanted to savor this moment, and allow you some time to pray before I kick your. Ha, you think you can beat me? Kiba mocked. No wonder you're the dead last of class, to think you actually believe you can win against me. Naruto shrugged, your friend doesn't seem to think it's so off. Naruto pointed over to Akamaru who was still whimpering up in the stands. Kiba growled, Akamaru, get down here. Akamaru just barked and shook his head, not wanting to get near the cloaked boy radiating power. The mere presence of the cloaked blonde screamed alpha. Looks like Akamaru's the smart one, Naruto said, his tone laced with amusement. Grr, shut up, I don't need Akamaru to beat a doby like you. Kiba shouted, all I need is one hit. Oh, Naruto mocked, well then, come on mutt, show me what you've got. Just don't go crying when I end up taking you to the pound. You asked for it, Kiba said as he ran towards Naruto. The dog user cocked his fist back, smashing it into Naruto's face. However, much to his, and everyone else's, shock, all it did was move Naruto's face to the side. Oh my, would you look at that, Naruto said in a sarcastic tone, I commend you for at least making me move my head a bit. As a sign of my appreciation, let me show you what a real punch feels like. With that, Naruto launched a fist into Kiba's gut, making the dog user double over as he felt his internals liquefy. Then Kiba was sent flying back several feet, smashing into a wall and causing the wall to break. Kiba slowly fell off the wall as he curled up into a ball, trying to get his breath back. So who's going to win this battle with one hit? Naruto mocked, because from where I'm standing it doesn't look like you can back up your words. Shut up, Kiba grunted as he tried to stand. It felt like all of his organs had been turned into mush. He winced and resisted the urge to whimper, though even through his pain-induced state, he couldn't help but wonder how Naruto got so powerful. I'm not gonna lose to you. Naruto laughed, you've already lost, you're just too stubborn to realize it. No, Kiba yelled, this is not over. I won't lose to a loser like you. Naruto was actually impressed when the dog user managed to push himself to his feet, though, from the way his legs were shaking, it looked like he was nearing his limit. Using the last of his strength, Kiba jumped in the air and began to spin, Suga piercing fang. Naruto watched as the spinning drill-like form of Kiba flew towards him with a lazy eye. As Kiba closed in, Naruto reared back his fist. Launching it just as Kiba got in range, Naruto's fist smashed against Kiba's head. For a moment time seemed to stand still. Then, it irrevocably moved forward as Kiba was launched away. He ended up not just hitting the statue on the platform where the Hokage was, but was also blasted right through it. Kiba came to a stop on the other side as he hit one of the stairs. Everyone's eyes widened as they stared at the scene, many thoughts going through people's minds. What the hell? Tamari wondered, shock clearly written upon her face. Her eyes looked like they might just roll out of her sockets, they were so wide. Isn't this supposed to be that idiot who had worn that ugly orange jumpsuit? When did he get so strong? When did he get new clothes for that matter? He beat Kiba like it was nothing, Kurenai thought in shock. How could the dead last of his class completely decimate one of the stronger students at the academy? She replayed the battle, which was less of a battle and more of a one-way slaughter, over and over again in her head, trying to figure out just what had happened. In the end, she came up with nothing. And Naruto-kun, what happened to you? Hinata asked herself. Truth be told, she was slightly afraid of this Naruto. While the blonde had always been loud and confident, he had never been this violent before. Worse still, he seemed to be enjoying it. You were never like this before. My Kikai are weary of Naruto. He is radiating chakra like a furnace, Shino thought. They are frightened. I will have to be careful if I end up fighting him. The power of that punch was even stronger than Lee's, Negi analyzed, yet there was no chakra put into that punch whatsoever. Man, Naruto's getting really troublesome, Shikamaru thought to himself, what a drag. What the hell is with this kid? Kankuro wondered. During the first stage this guy was nothing more than a loudmouthed idiot, and 5 days later he's smashing people through statues with a single punch. Naruto was oblivious to all the thoughts running through everyone's head as he looked at Hayate. Proctor-san, I believe you should call the match. Right, Hayate blinked. The winner of this match is Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto nodded as he went back up the stairs, not paying any attention to the looks he was receiving as he made his way over to his previous spot and leaned against the railing, not a care in the world. Rock Lee vs. Sabaku no Gaara. Yes, Lee shouted as he pumped his fist in the air. It worked. It worked. I used reverse psychology to make everybody think that I did not want to go, and it worked. Woo. Many people began getting disturbed when Lee started to dance. Not only was he dancing, but he was dancing poorly. Naruto thought he looked like a worm trying to stand up with the way he was waving all over the place. Thankfully, Guy was able to knock the boy out of his horrifying dance. Shut up, Lee, Guy yelled as he smashed a fist into Lee's face. Lee was sent flying, corck screwing and spiraling through the air, before landing on his back several feet away, but got up quickly as if nothing had happened, or this had happened so many times it no longer affected him. Naruto figured the boy had been smacked around so much that he was just using to getting hit like that. Maybe he's a masochist. Yes, Guy-sensei, Lee shouted. All right, Lee, listen to me carefully. Lee took out a notepad and pencil so he could write down everything Guy said to him. Guy leaned in close. Watch out for that gourd on his back, there's something creepy about it. Everyone who heard Guy face faulted. Everyone except Lee, who looked at Guy as if he had just said the single most brilliant thing in the world. Of course, Guy-sensei, Lee said as he wrote that advice down in his notes. Naruto shook his head as he watched Lee jump over the railing and onto the stage. Lee got into the beginning stance for the Goken Taijutsu style, feet together with one hand held behind his back in a fist while the other hand was in front, palms up as if in a welcoming gesture. As soon as Lee got into his stance, the cork on Gaara's gourd popped out and flew at the bowl-cut boy. Lee caught the cork and dropped it to the ground. There is no need to hasty, Gaara-san, Lee said, getting back in his stance. There will be plenty of time for us to show off our flames of youth. Sabaku no Gaara vs. Rock Lee, begin, Hayate said, sunctioning away from the stage. Rock Lee disappeared in a burst of speed, reappearing right next to Gaara and launched his opening kick. Konoha Senpu, Leaf Hurricane. Before the kick could even connect, sand shot out of the gourd and blocked it. Lee was surprised for a second, before he rebounded away when the sand tried to grab hold of him. Landing on the ground, the taijutsu specialist launched himself at Gaara again. Naruto watched the battle with a frown. Something about Gaara was bothering him. The boy was just standing there, not even really paying attention to Lee, who was attacking from many different angles in the hopes of getting past the boy's sand. Still, it was confusing. Why didn't he even try to do something about Lee? And instead stand still as if invulnerable. That boy holds a demon. Q-chan, Naruto asked as he heard the voice in his head. Yes, Naruto-sama, Kyuubi said, feeling a bit flustered at the continuous use of Naruto's new nickname for her. You said that boy with the gourd holds a demon, Naruto said as he saw Lee get caught by the sand and flung away. So he is like me, or like I used to be. Yes, Kyuubi answered, that boy holds the Ikibi no Shukaku, the one-tailed giant tanuki. Though it is quite odd, judging from the boy's eyes, he has obviously not gotten much sleep. Also, while I cannot pick up much from the demon, I can hear its screams of insanity. Or at least I can sense them. Screams of insanity, Naruto questioned, raising an eyebrow when Lee dropped what had to be several 100-pound weights. Though, he was just judging this from the way the earth shook and several feet-deep craters were formed where the leg weights hit the ground. So you're saying Gaara has a crazed demon in him? The blonde watched as Lee shot off at Gaara at speeds far faster than most Jonin could produce. Had he not had his vision enhanced, Naruto knew there would have been no way for him to keep up. Lee finally managed to land a punch on Gaara, due to the sand not being able to keep up with Lee's speed. Not so much, Kyuubi corrected. Shukaku has always had a large bloodlust and love for battle, but he was never insane like this. The problem is that it almost feels as if Shukaku's soul is being tormented by something, or someone else. On the stage, Lee began to run around Gaara, increasing his speed so much that most of the genin only saw blurs and slight after images. Naruto was the only genin who could keep up with Lee's speed easily. Before anyone could wonder what was going on, Lee shot out of the circle, giving Gaara a rising kick in the chin. However, due to the sand, Gaara had barely even been lifted off the ground. Not one to be deterred, Lee continued pounding into Gaara, lifting the red head higher and higher until he got Gaara to the necessary height for his move. Lee then wrapped Gaara up in bandages and began to rotate the two of them as they began to fall head first. Omid Renge, primary lotus. At the last second, Lee kicked off of Gaara, allowing him to crash to the floor. As Gaara crashed head first into the ground, creating a large crater and dust to rise, Lee landed on his hands, but was able to push himself into a back flip and land on his feet. Though, due to the damage done by using the double-bladed technique, Lee fell onto his back side. As the dust cleared, everyone was greeted with the sight of Gaara's battered body. At least that was what everyone thought, until the body caved in and turned into sand, revealing it to have been a clone. A malevolent and insane chuckle had Lee turning his head to see Gaara standing behind him with a demented grin on his face. Gaara sent out a tidal wave of sand at the injured taijutsu specialist. Lee tried to dodge but due to his injuries ended up getting hit, and found himself getting slammed into a wall. Several people winced as the sand tendrils wrapped around Lee's leg, lifted him up, then slammed him back down hard enough that the bowl-cut boy coughed up blood. This continued for quite a while, with Gaara finding more and more things to smack Lee again. The other boy began to look so battered many people were sure he would lose. However, Lee had one last trick up his sleeve. It took some work, but with a swift application of his strength via using his free foot to kick at the sand, he managed to break the connection. As he fell to the floor, Lee flipped around, landing on his feet and crossing his arms into an X position soon after. Kaiman. Kai, first gate. Gate of life, open. Lee shouted, before a massive surge of chakra was released from the boy's body as his skin began to turn red. Human. Kai, gate of healing, open. Even more chakra poured out of Lee. All of the previous wounds he had suffered began healing at an extreme rate. Naruto was actually impressed, while it was nowhere near his Kyuubi-induced healing, and couldn't even compare to his regeneration abilities now. It was still impressive for a human. How many gates can he open? Asked Kakashi, looking startled at seeing a genin capable of such a powerful and dangerous kinjutsu. 5, said Guy, his voice proud. Are you insane? Teaching a genin such a powerful kinjutsu? I don't expect you to understand, Kakashi, said Guy. Given that you refuse to train 2 of your students, it's obvious you wouldn't know what it means to help your genin achieve their dreams. So I won't bother talking about it. At being rebuffed by Maida Guy of all people, Kakashi growled and left within Assumption. Not wanting to be around others anymore. Simon. Kai, gate of life, open. As the output of Lee's chakra surged even more, the bowl-cut-haired boy's skin began turning red. Shoman. Kai, gate of pain, open. Veins began popping out of Lee's body. Naruto was able to see that the veins were actually his chakra coils thanks to his Rinnegan. While he could not see the chakra coils themselves, he could see the chakra coming off of the boy. It was more concentrated along the veins. Lee shot off the ground with such force that the tile shattered under the pressure. Gaara didn't even have time to blink as Lee smashed a fist into his face. Gaara went flying back and Lee appeared behind him, using another rising kick to launch the sand user into the air. Then he did the same thing, this time sending Gaara to the ground with a heel drop. On and on it went, with Lee playing pinball with Gaara as he launched the boy from one side of the room to the other, moving so fast that only a few of the people in the room were even able to follow. Naruto frowned, even he was beginning to have trouble keeping up with the boy now. That was unacceptable. I will need to train my speed when I get out of here, he decided. No human should be faster than me. Hell, I'm not going to let a demon be faster than me, so I won't allow some mere ninja to be. Don't worry, Naruto-sama, Kyuubi reassured her master. I will help you increase your speed, along with everything else. Ah, Naruto gushed over the seal. You're so sweet, Hyu-chan. Maybe I should give you a reward for such dedication to your master. While he could not see Kyuubi's blush, thanks to her fur being red and her being hidden inside his cloak, he could feel the heat she was radiating. Just thinking of how embarrassed she was made him grin. Finally, Lee launched Gaara back towards the ground, stopping the sand user's momentum a bit when he wrapped his bandages around the Tsunade. This is end. Toman. Kai, gate of limit, open. The two went spinning once again, only far faster than before. It had gotten to the point where the air around them had gotten so displaced that the two looked like they were in a tornado. Ura Renge, reverse lotus. The two crashed into the ground. Thankfully, Lee managed to push off and land safely, though he was too injured to even move anymore. All he could do was lie on his back, panting heavily as his droopy eyes looked over to where Gaara had crashed. Everyone wondered if the odd boy with the bowl-cut hair had won. Both Temari and Kankura were gaping at the scene. No one had ever hurt Gaara before, and this kid with the freaky eyebrows had just slammed their little brother into the ground, and that was after using him as a pinball. They both wondered if Gaara had finally met his match, while everyone else were already under the assumption that Gaara had lost. However, the participants, proctors and Jonin-sensei soon realized the red-haired genin was not defeated as the smoke cleared and they saw Gaara lying on his side, his sand under him from having it catch his fall. Gaara lifted up his right hand, making the sand shoot forward to grab onto Lee, in order to kill the person who had actually hurt him. Before the sand could get even 5 feet from Lee, Naruto appeared in front of it, his hands in front of him as if commanding the sand to stop. Shinra Tensei, Naruto whispered so no one else could hear him. It was the only move he knew for the Rinnegan, having received it from a dream while he slept. He wasn't very good with the technique, having only practiced it once, but he was good enough for what he intended to do. The sand was blown back as Naruto used the reverse the gravity around him to reject the sand. Everyone stared wide-eyed, both at the speed with which Naruto got there, and at the fact that Naruto had seemingly just stopped the sand with nothing but spreading out his hands. Hinata and Negi were the only ones who knew he had used some kind of jutsu, due to their Byakugan. It looks like he sent his chakra out in a push, as if he was using some form of repulsion to shove the sand away, Negi analyzed. It was an odd technique, something he had never seen, and the fact that it used no hand seals was troubling. Even more troubling to the Hyuga prodigy was the large concentration of chakra he could see in the boy's eyes, something that was normally only found when someone had a dojutsu. Yet he could see no evidence of such a bloodline with the blonde. Why did you stop me?" asked Gaara, confusion in his voice. Naruto shrugged, "Why wouldn't I stop you? Lee gave it his all and fought well. It would be a shame for you to kill or cripple him and not even allow me the chance to fight him in combat." Guy appeared next to Naruto and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you for helping Lee. Had something happened to my precious student?" "It's alright Guy-san," Naruto said with a shrug. "Like I said, it would be a shame if he got killed or crippled after such a magnificent battle." "Winner Gaara," Hayate announced. As the medics took an unconscious Lee away, a troubled Gaara walked up the stairs. "Gaara," Tamari asked tentatively, "are you okay?" Gaara looked at her, and it was the first time she had seen him look at anything without hate. "Mother is refusing to speak with me," Gaara said, turning his attention to Naruto who was now back in the stands. "She is afraid. That cloaked ninja frightens mother." His siblings and Jonin-sensei stiffened. They knew who his mother was, and for a Biju to be frightened by someone, well, it was a frightening thought. Baki knew they would have to tread very carefully if someone could actually scare a Biju into silence. Akamaiki Choji vs. Donuta Dosu. Choji gulped as he saw his opponent and remembered what the Oto Genin had done to them in the Forest of Death. It had not been that long ago since he and the others had been beaten by Dosu and his teammates, after all. "I think I'm just gonna forfeit." "What?" Ino yelled as she turned on Choji, hands on her hips and a glare on her face. It was the look of a girl who was not pleased. "You are not going to forfeit Choji." Asuma nodded. "You should at least give it your best." When Choji still looked unsure, Asuma decided to add some incentive. "I'll take you to your favorite barbecue." That seemed to get Choji fired up as he jumped down from the stand, looking like he was ready to take on the world. He even began ranting about how he would beat Dosu quickly so he could eat. Naruto shook his head at seeing how Asuma had to bribe the boy with food. He wasn't sure whether to laugh at the hilarity of it, or feel pity that this boy couldn't be motivated to get stronger simply for the sake of getting stronger. "Good luck fatty," Ino said, giving the boy even more incentive to fight. Choji's face turned red with anger. "That's it. First I'm gonna get this guy, then I'm coming for you Ino." Dosu just ignored the Choji until the match started. This one, like several others, was fairly fast. Choji had used his expansion jutsu to turn into a large ball, and tried to roll over Dosu. However, the man had merely hopped out of the way, allowing the large genin to crash into a wall. After that, all it took was a tap from his melody arm and Choji was out like a light. Hinata Hyuga vs. Negi Hyuga. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the pairing. He knew Hinata from his class, though he would confess to not knowing her very well. She had always been a weird one, blushing a beet red and passing out the few times he'd tried to talk to her. However, he knew next to nothing about Neji, other than that he looked like someone with a stick shoved further up his then Sasuke. There was also the stench of hatred coming off of Neji, who was watching the younger Hyuga child with a glare that looked like it could kill someone. Naruto had no clue what was going on there, but his gut was telling him trouble was brewing. Hinata paled as she walked down the stairs and stood across from Negi. "Hinata-sama," Negi said with a sneer, "you should just give up. You cannot win against me. Fate has decided that you will lose this battle. You are too kind-hearted and weak. You will always be weak, and nothing you can do will change that. You should give up." Hinata looked like she was about to cry, but before anything else could happen, Naruto started to chuckle. That chuckle soon turned into outright laughing as the blonde held his gut. Everyone looked at him with raised eyebrows, while Negi turned his sneer onto Naruto. "Ha ha ha ha, Oh Cammy haha, this is fucking rich, ha ha ha, listening to you talking about fate like it was some kind of all-controlling entity. Naruto's laughing increased as Negi's face turned red with fury. To Naruto it just made him look constipated, and that just made him laugh harder. Ha 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 ha, so I guess that makes you fate's little bitch huh? Man you're so fucking pathetic, blaming your hardships on fate because you don't have the balls to face life head on. You're no warrior, just some little with a chip on his shoulder. Negi grit his teeth in frustration as he listened to Naruto insult him. How dare this no-name loser insult him? He was the prodigy of the Hyuga clan. He would have said something to shut the cloaked genin up, but he noticed Hinata looking at him with more confidence than he had ever seen in her. So I see you're still going to fight, Negi stated, a sneer coming onto his face. That's right, Hinata got into a stance, prepare yourself, Negi-ni-san. Negi just smiled as he got into a stance, he had wanted to show Hinata her inferiority anyways. The fight soon began and despite Hinata's best efforts, Naruto knew she would lose, as did many of the other jonin. Still she fought with a ferocity that no one had ever seen in the underconfident girl, it made her decision to fight all the more worth it. The battle basically ended when Hinata hit Negi thinking she had won, only for the Hyuga prodigy to show her that he had been cutting off her Tenketsu points, making her Jiyuken strikes useless. Despite this Hinata still fought on, even though she knew it was a futile effort. In the end, Hinata was hit with a Jiyuken strike to the chest, sending her sprawling onto the ground. Proctor-san, call the match, Negi said as he turned around and began walking off the stage. Hey Neji-chan, Naruto called in a sing-song voice, you might want to turn around. Negi did, about to insult the other genin, when he noticed, much to his shock, that Hinata was struggling to stand again. A small conversation ensued after that, it was low enough that most could not hear it. Only Naruto with his enhanced hearing could make it out. Hinata telling Negi that he was the one suffering because of the clan, not her. The girl's words consequently sent him into a rage, and he ran at Hinata, intent on ending her life. Like with Lee, before he could make it even 5 feet, and before the genin and jonin knew what was happening, Naruto appeared in front of Neji. Grabbing the Hyuga prodigy by the throat and lifting him up, while 2 other Narutos appeared on either side, Kunai aimed at his vital points. You know it's not nice to try and kill your own family, Neji-chan, Naruto said. Though he spoke in a sing-song voice the blonde was anything but happy. Once again, it wasn't that he actually cared about the girl Neji was fighting, since all he knew of her was that she was extremely shy and introverted. It was that Hinata was the Hyuga prodigy's family, and for someone who was an orphan like Naruto, family should be protected and loved above all else. Neji tried to reply but Naruto was cutting off his air circulation. He tried to Jiyuken Naruto, but the other genin merely swatted his hands away with impunity each time. Behind Naruto, Hinata had finally fallen, causing the medics as well as Hinata's jonin-sensei to rush to the girl's side. Consider yourself lucky we're in a tournament and killing you would disqualify me, Naruto said, otherwise you would not live to see the next day. Naruto dropped the boy who had been starting to turn blue. He looked over at Guy, I suggest you beat some humility into this boy, arrogance like his will not only get him killed, but his teammates killed as well. Guy merely gave him a nod, grabbing Negi and taking him off the stage. I'm definitely going to have to talk to Naruto after all of this, Sarutobi thought to himself as he watched Naruto take his place with the other genin in front of the stage now that the Chunin exams were over. To all of you have earned the right to compete in the 3rd stage of the Chunin exams, congratulations, Hayate said. Before taking a step back, allowing the Hokage to stop forward. Sarutobi coughed into his hand briefly to clear his throat, allow me to explain the last stage of the exams for all of you. As I said before, it was at this point that Naruto started to tune the man out. Kami, you know I really do love Oji-san and all, but he has this really cryptic way of speaking that pisses me off. And he's more long-winded than Iruka-sensei. It's just how old people are Naruto-sama, Kyuubi said placatingly. My father was the same way before I became the Kyuubi. That reminds me, how did you become the Kyuubi exactly? Naruto asked. I'm not sure, to be honest, Kyuubi said, not having a problem with telling her new master what she knew. As I said, I was hit with a very powerful chakra. It must have been around 700-800 years ago. I ended up blacking out, and when I woke up I had 9 tails instead of 3. After that, my father named me clan head and gave me the title of Kyuubi. So Kyuubi is just a title then? Asked Naruto. It is both my title and my name, Kyuubi said. Naruto frowned. Then what were you called before you became the Kyuubi? Kyuubi. Naruto asked when the vixen was silent. It doesn't matter, Kyuubi said eventually, it's no longer my name. Naruto could hear some bitterness in her voice and decided to back off with his questions. Instead he turned his attention back to Sarutobi. Now I would like to dismiss all of you, but there is one more matter we must attend to. Sarutobi said as Anko stepped forward with a box in her hand. There are pieces of paper with a number on it within the box Anko is holding. I want each of you to take one. I'll come around to you, so I want you brats to wait your turn, Anko said. Anko walked around to each genin who would take a piece of paper and then move on. When she got to Naruto she gave him a wink, causing the cloaked genin to raise an eyebrow. Now that everyone has a piece of paper I would like each of you to tell me the number it has on it, Anko said. We'll start from the left. 5, said Shino. 2, Neji said. 7, said Tamari. 6, Konkuro said. 3, Gaara said. Troublesome. 8, said Shikamaru. 1, Naruto said, a grin hidden behind his mask. 9, said Dosu. 10, said Ino. That means the Uchiha has 4, Ibiki muttered. We will now reveal your matchup for the first round of the tournament, Sarutobi said. Naruto Uzumaki vs. Neji Hyuga, Gaara no Sabaku vs. Sasuke Uchiha, Shino Aburame vs. Konkuro no Sabaku, Tamari no Sabaku vs. Shikamaru Nara, Ino Yamanaka vs. Dosu Kinyuda. Now before everyone is dismissed, do any of you have questions you would like answered? Asked Sarutobi. Since this is a tournament, that means there can only be one winner, right? So does that mean only one person can become a chunin? Asked Shikamaru. Not at all, Sarutobi replied. There will be judges including myself, the Case Cage, various daimyos from other countries and other ninja leaders who will be here to watch to evaluate your performance. Those who have the necessary qualities of a chunin will be able to become one, even if they lose their first match. Consequently, someone can win the whole tournament, but if we do not feel they are qualified, they will not become chunin. So does that mean it's possible for everyone to become a chunin? Asked Tamari. Yes, Sarutobi said, but it's equally possible that no one will become a chunin. Advancing in the tournament gives you more opportunities to show off your abilities and appeal to the judges, so make sure you do your best. If that is all, then you are all dismissed, said Sarutobi. Most of the genin started hooking up with their jonin senseis to leave. Naruto was about to head out himself, when the Sandame spoke again, stopping the blonde boy in his tracks. However, I would like to ask Uzumaki Naruto to stay. Naruto raised an eyebrow, but remained nonetheless. When the other genin were gone, Naruto let his voice be known. So what's up, Oji-san? Wanted to congratulate me for kicking? Naruto questioned. Sarutobi chuckled a bit at the boy's crass attitude, at least that hadn't changed. That is part of the reason. However, I would also like to speak with you in private. Why don't we head to my office? Sarutobi did not give Naruto a chance to speak as he placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and they disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto was sitting in front of the desk in Sarutobi's office, waiting for the aging Hokage to speak. As he did, his eyes gazed around the room, taking in the light beige walls, the bookshelf that sat on his left and the couch with the pictures of the 4 Hokages on his right and slightly behind him. The desk Sarutobi was sitting in was large, made of a dark brown wood and holding several items of interest, as well as 2 large stacks of paperwork, which always seemed to be there no matter how many times Naruto came in. Behind the desk and the comfortable leather chair that the Sandame sat in, was a large window that overlooked Konoha. He had been in this room many times in the past, probably more than anyone else who had not been Hokage. The room held many fond memories for him, times when he and the aging Sandame would sit around and he would listen as Sarutobi told him stories from his youth, of his times training with the Shadaime and Nadaime Hokages, while eating some cookies that the man's secretary would get for them. It was also here that Naruto began to learn about what was required of a Hokage beyond being the strongest shinobi of the village. Sarutobi reached into his desk and pulled out his pipe, packing some tobacco into it before using a fire jutsu to light it. He took a few puffs on his pipe as he looked at Naruto. He sat there, silently contemplating the young man for a few moments before speaking. First, I would like to congratulate you on your victory in the second stage of the Chunin exams, Sarutobi said. You showed a rather impressive amount of strength to do what you did, and the timing of your last attack was impeccable. The Sandame was of course speaking the precise timing required to hit an Inuzuka while they were using the Suga technique. In order to do any damage and not receive it in return, someone had to precisely time their attack to the exact moment the Inuzuka makes a full revolution. Thanks, Naruto replied, but we both know that's not the reason you called me here, is it, Oji-san? Quite right, Sarutobi said, wondering a bit about the boy's increased perceptiveness. He better than anyone knew that Naruto had never been stupid, but just because Naruto wasn't dumb, didn't mean he was perceptive. Before we begin, could you take off your hood and mask? Kyuubi, Naruto said, already on it, Kyuubi replied as she cast a kitsune illusion to become invisible. Normally such a burst of Yuki would have been clearly felt, but being near Naruto, who had nearly 4 times more Yuki than Kyuubi did after his transformation. No one felt it. Naruto reached up and pulled down his hood, revealing his now long spiky hair which moved into his cloak. Then he pulled off his face mask, revealing his now lean and slightly aristocratic features. Sarutobi was surprised to see that the boy looked almost exactly like his father now, with the exception of his longer than average canines, and that his hair was obviously far longer than Minato's had been. It was even more surprising to see that the boy's whiskers were gone. "What happened to you, my boy?" asked Sarutobi, shock clearly evident in his voice. "You look older." Naruto finished for him, smiling a bit. "I know. I can't honestly explain what happened because I don't know myself," he lied. While the blonde demon shinobi may trust the Hokage, he didn't want word about what he had learned getting out until he was ready to face anything that might come his way. "All I remember is fighting that freaky lady who could summon snakes." He watched as Sarutobi stiffened. "The next thing I knew was that woman smashing her hand into my gut while shouting some kind of jutsu. After that I was knocked unconscious, and when I woke up, I looked like this and felt nearly unlimited power at my disposal." Sarutobi tried to understand what was going on. The snake lady, as Naruto called her, was obviously Orochimaru. Enko had told him what had transpired between her and her former sensei in the Forest of Death, and he knew that his former student had marked the young Uchiha Sasuke with his Juinjutsu cursed seal. But it was obvious he had done something to Naruto as well. If what the blonde said was true, then he had most likely tampered with the seal somehow. That could be very dangerous to Naruto, especially since no one aside from Kushina and another Uzumaki would have the same knowledge of sealing that the Yondaime had. "Naruto-kun, may I see your stomach?" Sarutobi asked. "It is possible that ninja tampered with the seal that holds the Kyuubi." Naruto shrugged before pulling off his cloak, setting it on the chair as he lifted his shirt up, revealing his stomach. "Channel some chakra please," the old Hokage said. Naruto began doing so, and Sarutobi was once again surprised when nothing happened. He could feel the chakra circulating through Naruto. It was impossible not to feel that maelstrom of energy that surrounded the blonde. Yet the Hake no Fuin Shiki 8 trigrams sealing style that held the Kyuubi was not visible. Had something happened to the seal? Did it break? But if that were the case, then Naruto should be dead and the Kyuubi would be free, or dead as well. He would have to get Jiraiya's opinion on this. If something happened to the seal, he would be the one who was most likely to figure it out. What Sarutobi did not realize was that the seal was gone, because Kyuubi was no longer in the seal, so it had nothing to hold. "So, any problems, Oja-san?" asked Naruto. "Number," Sarutobi said at last. No sense in worrying the boy when he himself had no clue what happened to the seal. "No problems, you can go now." Naruto put his shirt back down and shrugged his cloak on. "I should probably tell you I'm not gonna be in Konoha this month," Naruto said. "I have some ideas for some new jutsu, but all of them are fairly destructive. So I'm going to be heading outside of Konoha to train." Sarutobi looked at the boy. "I suppose that is fine," he said at last. There was nothing in the rule books that said a ninja had to stay within Konoha during the month training period. It was unusual for a Konoha ninja to leave, but not unheard of. "Just make sure you're careful." Naruto gave the old man a grin. "Hey, it's me." Sarutobi watched the blonde leave and sighed. "That's what I'm afraid of." As soon as Naruto exited Konoha, he made his way into the thicket of trees that surrounded the hidden village, traveling through them via tree hopping until he felt they were sufficiently far enough away that no one would detect what they were doing. "So what do we do now?" Naruto asked, despite the fact that no one could be seen. Were any hypothetical witness watching, they would have sweat dropped before declaring the blonde clinically insane. Kyuubi uncurled herself from his neck and hopped out from underneath his cloak, transforming into her Hanyu form in midair. She landed on the ground and turned to Naruto. "Well, I figured the first thing we need to do is get you accustomed to your new body and powers. To do that, we're going to go to the Cursed Plains in Makai. We'll get you some battle experience against some of the lesser demons." "So how are we going to get to Makai?" asked Naruto with a raised eyebrow. While everyone had heard the many myths that surrounded the supposed underworld, a world in which demons roamed free and only the strongest survived. At least that was the information he had grown up on. No human had ever been to Makai, so no one actually knew anything about it. "We'll perform the ritual to open a gate to Makai," Kyuubi replied matter-of-factly. "The first thing we need is demon blood to draw out the seals needed to open the gate. After that, it's just a simple matter of summoning enough Yuki to open the gate." Naruto nodded and was about to take out a kunai when Kyuubi used her claws to cut into herself. Blood flowed from the wound that was quite deep. Despite that, the red-haired beauty didn't even flinch. Naruto, however, did. "Hey, what are you doing?" Naruto asked, shocked that she would so callously injure herself. Kyuubi looked at him and blinked in a confused fashion. "I'm using my blood to write the ritual." "Is that a problem, Naruto-sama?" "Well, Naruto watched as Kyuubi began writing a complex seal on the trees. I suppose not, I just thought we were going to use my blood. Don't be silly, Naruto-sama, Kyuubi said chidingly as she cut her palms again as they had already healed over, dipping her finger into her blood and writing some more. I am also a demon, so my blood will work just fine. Besides, I am your servant. It would be improper of me to let you use your blood, when I am perfectly capable of doing this myself. Kyuubi let out a squeak of surprise as a pair of arms wrapped around her from behind, pulling her against a well-muscled chest. She let out a shiver when she felt Naruto's breath into her ear. His breath was hot and the red-haired demoness could begin to feel herself melt into him. If the blonde kept this up, Kyuubi was sure it would only take a matter of seconds before she turned into a puddle of goo. You know that seal on your neck says otherwise, Naruto said. His voice was deeper than normal and carried a slight growl to it. Kyuubi was mortified when she let a moan escape her throat at the sound of his voice. Even worse, she could feel her getting wet and her love juices beginning to run down her thighs. And he was just talking to her. That is not the seal of a servant, Hugh-chan. Kyuubi's breath came out in pants as all of her demonic instincts were screaming at her to claim the male behind her. To rip off their clothes and let him mount her. To let him claim her as they rutted like kitsune in heat. She did her best to quell those treasonous thoughts, however, as she spoke, I am still your servant Naruto-sama. Even if this seal says otherwise, this the only way to repay you for my sins. Naruto sighed as he let go of her, his voice returning to normal. You know it's not your fault, Hugh. I don't particularly care that you were sealed into my mom, or that you had done your best to escape the seal. You just wanted freedom. Were our positions reversed, I have no doubt I would have been trying to break free as well. As for the rest, it doesn't really matter. It's not like you wished to destroy Konoha. I doubt its destruction was even important to you. That's kind of you to say, Naruto-sama, Kyuubi said, glad she was facing away from Naruto so that he would not see her tears of gratitude. She quickly raised her left hand to wipe them away, not wanting him to see her show of weakness. However, it is my fault. If I had been more cautious this would not have happened. Naruto frowned. He couldn't really understand why this woman was being so damn obstinate. If anyone should be angry and unforgiving at her, then it should be Naruto himself. Yet he didn't blame her for what happened. He knew she was involved in his parents' death, but he also knew while she may have been part of the problem, she had not been the catalyst for his parents' death. And really, how could he blame someone for attempting to be free? No sentient being wanted to be locked away. Even if he wanted to, Naruto found he couldn't blame the woman for what happened. So why couldn't she just accept that he didn't care and move on? He sighed. Shikamaru was right. Women were troublesome. Having decided to just let her work, Kyuubi managed to finish the seals shortly after and began to channel her Yuki into them. A large black cloud filled with crackling red energy inside formed in front of the tree she was using. It reminded Naruto of the thunderclouds he had occasionally watched when Konoha had its rare storms. Only those were bluish-gray, with yellow lightning. Not black with red lightning. The cloud began to take shape, shifting and hardening until it looked like a mirror with swirling red energy trapped inside. Follow me, Naruto-sama, Kyuubi said as she walked towards the mirror. As her body touched the hard-looking surface, a ripple spread out across it, making the surface look more like a liquid than a solid. Naruto watched as Kyuubi disappeared inside of the mirror and shrugged. A few moments later he walked through the mirror himself, not concerned about what he may find on the other side. What do you mean you let him leave the village? A disgruntled Jiraiya practically yelled at the top of his lungs as he paced Sarutobi's office. Jiraiya was a tall man with waist-length, spiky white hair usually tied back into a ponytail, with two shoulder-length bangs that framed both sides of his face. He also had red lines that ran down from his eyes and wore a horned forehead protector with the kanji for oil. The only other physical feature worth noting, aside from his tall and imposing physique, was the single wart on the right side of his nose. Unlike most ninja, Jiraiya's clothing consisted of a green short shirt kimono and matching pants, under which he wore mesh armor that showed out of the sleeves and legs of his outfit. His outfit was completed with hand guards, a simple black belt, traditional Japanese geta, wooden sandals, a red cloak with two simple yellow circles, and a large scroll that was tied to ninja wire around his left shoulder and rested securely on his back. Sarutobi gave his most loyal student a flat look. I mean exactly what I said. Naruto has left Konoha to train in his new Kekkei Genkai. He will likely not be back until it's time for the Chunin exams. I meant, why did you let him leave? Jiraiya asked in an annoyed tone. How am I supposed to train Naruto if he's not even here? It had not been long since Jiraiya had come here looking for Naruto. After 2 weeks of waiting for the boy to just apparently show up at his feet, the white-haired man had come to Sarutobi, asking where Minato's brat was. The man had obviously not been happy by Sarutobi's explanation. Not that the old man cared in the least. If anything, Jiraiya was to blame for the mess he was in. Sarutobi shrugged. Perhaps if you had met with him before now this wouldn't have happened. Don't try to guilt-trip me, Sarutobi-sensei, Jiraiya said, looking disgruntled at the older man's words. I have too many duties that keep me away from the village, you know that. My spy network is important. There are too many dangers out there that we are only aware of because of my network, I couldn't leave it unattended. I am not saying what you did was wrong, the aging Hokage said, placating his student. He took a puff of his pipe and blew out a ring of smoke. I am merely stating that you probably should have tried to apprentice him sooner, or at the very least, visited him when he was younger. Jiraiya gave an exasperated sigh. He should have known Sarutobi would bring that up. It was true that Jiraiya had been in Konoha several times before now, and had even seen Naruto running around causing havoc when he was 6. Though he had never introduced himself to the kid. What would he say? Nice to meet you, Gaki. By the way, I'm your godfather, but I wasn't even there for you when you were younger. Hope you can forgive me. Yeah, that would go over well. So where is he now? Asked Jiraiya, grumbling and mentally complaining about old coots who should keep out of other people's business. He told me that he was going to head south, Sarutobi stated, completely unhelpfully. It's not like knowing the general direction of where the boy went would help Jiraiya find him. I do not know anything else other than that. Damn it, Jiraiya mumbled. You only have yourself to blame for this, Jiraiya-kun, the old Hokage chided. Jiraiya glared at Sarutobi as he left, deciding to spend some time researching in order to cool down. He would begin searching for the blonde after he had some time to think. Naruto looked around with a blank expression. The cursed plains looked in many ways, exactly how Naruto thought it would look. The ground was desolate with no life to be seen for miles, there were several large cracks around the surface. The sky was a blood red, and as Naruto looked off in the distance he could see a large mountain range and several forests that looked as dead as the plain he was in. There was no signs of life for miles around. So how are we going to find some demons to fight? Asked Naruto. We will just walk around the plain until some demons come to us, Kyuubi answered as she began walking. It didn't look like she had any destination in mind. Lower levels demons won't appear until after you step into their territory, so we'll walk around the plain until we find them. That sounds kind of boring, Naruto said as he ran to catch up to her. Are you complaining, Naruto-sama? Kyuubi said as a dangerous gleam crossed her eyes. It was a look that all females gained when annoyed, something they knew how to do instinctively. Even a civilian woman could gain that look, and it was enough to freeze any man in his tracks, all-powerful demon or not. Nope, no complaining, Naruto said hurriedly, instinctively recognizing that look as a bad look. It brought all of his preservation instincts, honed from generation to generation of males who had suffered that look. Good, Kyuubi chirped as the look faded from her eyes. So, what exactly are you going to be teaching me? Asked Naruto, after having not found any demons for nearly 15 minutes. Well, to start, I'll teach you how to use your Yuki to create a physical attack, Kyuubi answered. Physical, Naruto mumbled, you mean like shape manipulation? It is similar, but that is a human's version of manipulation, Kyuubi said derisively. It was clear that she did not hold humanity or their abilities in high regard. I'm going to show you how demons manipulate their Yuki. It is far more advanced than anything a human can do. So then you must be pretty good at that sort of thing, Naruto said. Kyuubi managed to give Naruto a smirk. Yuki manipulation is my specialty, as the Kyuubi my ultimate ability is complete mastery over my own Yuki. So the Biju have specialties then? Asked Naruto. Biju is simply the name humans gave us as a means of placing a label on that which they don't understand, Kyuubi scoffed. Our actual title is Demon Lord. There are 9 of us in total. Each of us have enough power to rule much of Makai if we wanted. Though only Hachibi and myself have enough Yuki to rival the 2 demon kings. She didn't include Ryzen in that category. He could beat all 9 demon lords with his hands tied behind his back. So what are the specialties of the other demon lords? Asked Naruto. Honestly, he was quite curious to hear what she had to say. After all, the very little was known about the Biju. Kyuubi tapped her chin a few times. Well, the Aikibi is a master of wind, and has a decent earth manipulation. That's how he can use sand, isn't it? Naruto realized, understanding how Gaara was now able to use sand as a form of defense and attack. Ever since seeing the ability, he had wondered how someone could manipulate sand like that. Kyuubi nodded. Yes, he combines wind and earth to form sand. Then you have the Nibi, who has control over fire and life and death. She works closely with the Shinigami to ferry the souls of the dead to the netherworld. The Sanbi has a mastery over water that makes your Nadaime Hokage look like an academy student. Yonbi has the ability to use earth and fire, as well as the ability to combine them to form lava. The gobi uses fire and water and can combines them to make steam. The rokubi is a master at creating bubbles attacks through the combination of water, wind and fire. The nanabi is a master of earth and can use bugs to attack. And the hachibi is a master of lightning, physical combat and swordplay. And yours is mastery over your Yuki, Naruto said. Actually I can do a little of everything, Kyuubi admitted. I just specialize in Yuki manipulation and Kitsune illusions. She paused here, before adding, and like all Kitsune I can use plant-based attacks. Naruto blinked at that piece of knowledge. You mean like the Shadaime's Mokuden? No, Kyuubi shook her head. Mokuden is wood attacks, it's limited to trees and the like. I can use plants, from creating basic poisons to growing large plants that feast on flesh. Naruto raised an eyebrow. He would be lying if he said he wasn't interested in learning more about her plant ability. However, he put thoughts on that to the side as he moved on. So can you use the elements then? Of course, Kyuubi said. I may not be as proficient as the other Biju or in their specific element, but I'm good enough that no human can hope to be better than me. Naruto gave another nod and then remained silent as he digested the information given to him. He wondered if he could gain Kyuubi's proficiency in all of the elements like her. Was she capable of that simply because she was the Kyuubi? Or did it just require power and time to master? He wondered if Raizen Ojisan knew how to manipulate the elements. The silence was broken 15 minutes later by Naruto's scream of frustration. Gah! What the hell? Why aren't there any demons to fight? I'm not sure. Naruto-sama, Kyuubi replied just as confused. She looked around at the desolate plain, as if expecting a demon to pop up at any moment. There are always demons running around these plains, that we haven't run into any is odd. The only reason we wouldn't is if, Kyuubi's eyes widened as she realized what was wrong, and resisted the urge to smack herself. Naruto-sama, the reason we haven't run into any demons is because they're afraid of you, Kyuubi said. Afraid of me? Naruto asked in confusion before he scowled. If they're afraid of me then what's the point of even bothering to fight them? Simple. I should be able to teach you some of the basic techniques by using them as target practice, Kyuubi stated, as if her reasoning should be obvious. It's best to learn your powers in a controlled environment. If we were to seek out the stronger opponents, it could be dangerous without a decent grasp of your power. Naruto sighed, knowing she had a point. So then how do we get them to come out? You need to learn how to mask your presence, Kyuubi answered as if it was the simplest answer in the world. No demon, even a lower-ranking one that acts purely on instinct will fight against a demon that has enough Yuki to crush both the current demon kings at the same time with ease. So how do I mask my presence? Asked Naruto. It's a fairly easy ability. You must think of your Yuki as a ball within the center of your chest. That is your core. When you find your core, your task is to make it smaller by compressing it. Sit down. I shall help you in this endeavor. The next hour was spent with Naruto compressing his Yuki to what Kyuubi said was an acceptable level. She would eventually work on his control until he could mask himself perfectly, but that would take a long time and right now she wanted him to focus on his combat techniques more than stealth. It seemed to work as 5 minutes later the two were forced to jump out of the way when several demons shot out from the ground. Blades, Kyuubi said as she and Naruto landed on the ground, eyeing the reptilian demons. The things looked like some kind of miniature dragons, or giant lizards. They were all wearing gladiator armor, had armor-colored claws and shields on their left arms. They like to travel underground and attack you then. So long as you're fast enough to dodge their first attack you should be fine. Whatever, Naruto said as the 6 creatures dug back underground and came at him. A smirk made its way on his face. Let's rock. So how'd I do? Asked Naruto as he did some stretches after killing off the last demon. Kyuubi stood on the sidelines to see how well he fought. The blades didn't actually provide much of a challenge, but they were good enough that Kyuubi had been able to study her new master's fighting style. Truthfully, Naruto-sama, you suck. Naruto face faulted. Getting up he rubbed his nose and glared at his companion. What? Why? Kyuubi tapped a finger against her chin as a thoughtful look crossed her face. Well, let's see. Your taijutsu is awful. You don't even seem to have any kind of style when it comes to fighting. It's like you just do whatever the hell pops up in your head. You have no control over your Yuki, and your chakra control is, well, I would say it was awful but that would really be understating things. You lack technique, you lack finesse, you basically lack any kind of substantial skill. Naruto crouched down and began playing with the dirt as a rain cloud poured over his head. Yeah, well, it's not like anyone bothered to teach me, and since Mizuki was the one who taught taijutsu. Kyuubi winced, guilt welling up inside of her at hurting the one she was supposed to serve. I'm sorry, Naruto-sama. I did not mean to imply this was through any fault of your own. I may not have been fully conscious of what went on outside of the seal, but I saw how Jinchuriki were treated in other countries. Given what you've told me, you see your time in Konoha has been just as bad, if not worse than others. I merely wanted to give you an accurate dissertation of your skills. Sock. Naruto smiled as the rain cloud that had been matting his hair to his face disappeared. He stood back up, looking as chipper as ever. But not to worry, Kyuubi said cheerfully. That's why we're here. I'm going to help you train. With your power it should be easy to gain more than enough strength to defeat a cage during this month period. Really? Asked Naruto, blinking. Cages were the strongest ninja in the entire world. It took years if not decades to reach that level, and even then, very few were ever capable of reaching the prestigious S rank, which was the level of a cage. Really? Kyuubi said with an enthusiastic nod. By the time we're done, you will be more than a match for any cage-level ninja. Alright, Naruto shouted as he hopped onto his feet with renewed energy. So what are we working on first? Yuki control, and chakra control. Naruto face faulted. He had always had horrible control, and now he had two types of energy to control. Naruto concluded right then and there that his entire experience this month was going to suck. You've gotten a lot better, you said. Why don't we go find an arch-fiend for you to fight, you said. It will be fine, Naruto-sama, nothing to worry about, Naruto said, mimicking Kyuubi's tone of voice to show how thoroughly disgruntled he was. That is the last time I ever listened to you. It had only been a few days since Naruto had begun his training. And in that time Naruto had truly come into his own. Without the seal blocking his potential, the blonde was learning far more quickly than even Kyuubi had thought possible. After he had mastered the few Yuki control exercises she had given him, the vixen had taught him how to properly apply his new power to increase his speed and strength, and how to form basic energy attacks using his Yuki. Kyuubi had to admit to being impressed with the blonde's ability to learn. While he could not stand listening to lectures, so long as you showed him what you wanted him to learn, he would get the technique down in under an hour. Of course, the fact that Naruto had learned the secrets behind the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu had meant what would normally take days or weeks to master, took far less time, depending on the amount of clones Naruto made. Kyuubi rolled her eyes as her master continued complain as they made their way down the busy street in one of the demon villages within Makai. She sighed as she noticed the many looks of lust being sent her way by the men that she and Naruto walked past. It bothered her to receive those looks, especially since she only needed to display her tails to get them to stop. However, it had been decided by her, and seconded by Naruto, that she should hide them so that rumor of her continued existence didn't get out to the two demon kings. That still didn't mean she wasn't annoyed. Even worse for her were the looks her master was getting. So far, every single female they had passed by had stopped upon seeing Naruto. Their faces would go red, eyes would widen, mouths would gape open and produce vast amounts of drool. Not only was it disgusting to watch women debase themselves by being so blatant in their staring, but it irritated Kyuubi to no end. None of these girls were even worthy of looking at her master. Getting her mind back on track, Kyuubi rolled her eyes, and when Naruto paused for breath asked, "You weren't injured, Naruto-sama, why are you complaining?" "It's not a matter of getting hurt," Naruto said in an annoyed tone. "Those clothes were some of the only pair I had, now they're gone," he gestured to himself. Like when he had gone through his transformation from human to demon, Naruto was completely shirtless and his pants were ripped in multiple places, showing off parts of his boxers. "Which is why we're going to get new clothes for you," Kyuubi said as if speaking to a child. Really, sometimes her master could be so immature. Besides, human clothes are far inferior to the clothes that you'll find here. "Now stop being such a child. I don't sound like a child, do I?" Naruto asked, an innocent look on his face. Kyuubi rolled her eyes. Despite his new personality, every now and then the old Naruto would come out. She would never admit it out loud, but it was somewhat endearing. Not that she would ever tell him that. "At the moment you do. Really, Naruto-sama, you need to learn to be more mature." Naruto grinned, and before Kyuubi knew what was happening, he disappeared from where he was and reappeared behind her. A pair of arms wrapped themselves around her waist, pulling her flush against a well-defined chest and six-pack. Despite her best efforts, Kyuubi's face took on the same hue as her hair as blood rushed to her cheeks. "Now don't be like that, Q-chan," Naruto whispered in a husky voice, "I can be plenty mature. Perhaps you would like me to show you how mature I can be." Kyuubi shuddered and just barely managed to keep her arousal down so none of the demons near them could smell her musk. Even then, she could not stop herself from leaking a small amount of love juice that ran down her thighs. The combination of Naruto's musky scent filling her nose, his hard and well-muscled body pressing against her back, his voice a husky growl in her ear, his hot breath hitting said ear, and the absolutely dominating demonic aura that screamed alpha was nearly too much for the fox woman's libido. "And Naruto-sama, we should get you your clothes," Kyuubi said, her voice haggard. It took a concerted effort of the most supreme willpower to rid herself of the lust her master's presence had caused. Taking a deep gulp of air, she removed his hands from around her waist. Stepping out of his hold, she began moving again, putting some distance between her and her master so she would not jump him in the streets. She could not give in to her temptations. Someone like her, who had made her master's life miserable, did not deserve to be with a person like Naruto. Getting herself back under control, Kyuubi began walking again. Come on, Naruto-sama, the store is just a short distance away. Naruto sighed as he followed Kyuubi. He was a little disappointed that she had turned him away, again, and could not understand her reasoning. He had been rather straightforward in his desire to be with her. Yet, no matter how many times he would flirt with her, compliment her, or use physical intimacy to fluster her, nothing ever happened. I don't get it. Is there something about me that she does not find attractive? He shook his head of the thoughts as the two entered a shop. Naruto took a moment to look around. The shop itself looked like many of the ones in the human world. The floor was made of wooden tile, a red wood of some kind that he did not recognize but assumed that was because the material for construction came from Makai. The walls were a light gray and looked to be made of rock or some kind of sediment. Not that it mattered, since most of the wall was covered by what they had on display. Likewise, the ceiling was made of the same material, and had 2 fans and 4 light fixtures hanging from it. The only difference he could discern between human shops and this one was that, in the human realm, all the clothes that they were selling was displayed for the customers. Here, it seemed that the different kinds of fabric used to make the clothes were displayed. There were several dozen racks running the length of the walls with various materials hanging from them. Set up in 6 aisle-like rows in the middle of the store were cubbyholes containing more fabric. Curious, Naruto walked up to the wall and grabbed the first piece of fabric he saw, a thin red material of some kind. Rubbing it between his fingers, he was surprised by how sturdy it was, especially since it was also ridiculously soft to the touch, like a combination between silk and wool. Ignoring her master perusing some of the fabrics, Kyuubi walked up to the clerk, an old kitsune sitting behind the desk, poring over an old scroll. Hekasi-san, Kyuubi shouted in surprise as she sped up to the old kitsune clerk. Hearing his name called, the old-looking kitsune looked up with a startled expression, before gasping in surprise as he laid eyes on the red-haired beauty. Kyuubi-sama. The 4-tailed kitsune stood up and rushed around the counter. Dropping down in front of Kyuubi, he got on his hands and knees to bow before the 9-tailed female. You're a sight for sore eyes. Our entire clan has been worried sick when you had disappeared. He looked up, and Naruto, who had stopped looking at the materials when he heard Kyuubi call out to the man, could see the sheer joy shining in his eyes. Wait until I inform the others of your return. You mean others survived? Asked Kyuubi, her voice a mere whisper. Naruto looked over at the vixen and was surprised to see that the woman looked close to tears. I can't believe it. How many of our clan live? Not as much as I would like, Kyuubi-sama, Hekasi said, his face taking on a look of depression. All total there are probably about 50 kitsune left, and they are scattered across Makai. The only reason the demon kings have not hunted us is they deemed us not worth the effort after you disappeared. He perked up a second later, but with you back that can change. We can once again rise to greatness. Hey Q-chan. Who's the old guy? Asked Naruto. He had been patiently listening to their conversation, but he was getting annoyed at not being introduced. Hekasi's eyes widened before they narrowed and he growled at the blonde. How dare you disrespect Kyuubi-sama with such familiarity? You should be getting down on your knees and begging forgiveness for showing such disrespect. Kyuubi's eyes widened and was about to turn and apologize on behalf of her friend when Naruto's killing intent washed over not only the store, but the whole village as well. Now you listen here, you worm. Naruto said, his eyes alight with power, and his voice now a deep regal and demonic tone. Kyuubi was on the floor gasping for breath and trembling as she tried with all her might to get back onto her feet. Hekasi was even worse, his eyes wide and some drool escaping his mouth as he lay on the floor in a fetal position. I do not care if you are Kyuubi's best friend or her former lover. Speak to me like that again and I will make sure that you suffer unimaginable horrors the likes of which will cause all of demon kind to shudder in fear for millennial to come. And Naruto-sama, Kyuubi gasped out, one hand reaching out and touching his foot. Naruto looked down at her, his eyes still glowing, but as he saw Kyuubi struggling to even breath, the glowing stopped. His eyes softened and grew concerned as his killing intent and power lessened, dwindling down until it was all gone. Naruto reached down and helped Kyuubi stand, wrapping one of his arms securely around her waist while he brought the other up to her head and began to run it through the trembling woman's hair. He pressed her head closer to his and nuzzled their cheeks together in a sign of affection. Gomen, Naruto whispered, his voice laden with regret at the troubles his actions had caused. I lost control for a moment there, I shouldn't have gotten so angry. Forgive me, please do not apologize, Naruto-sama, Kyuubi said, for once not resisting the intimate action. Indeed, where she might have pushed him away a few seconds ago, right now she cherished the feeling of being close to him like this. Especially after feeling his power and killing intent. She needed to reassure herself that this was still Naruto. This was my fault, I should have let him know that you were of higher status than myself. Naruto's face left hers with a sigh. Kyuubi would always take the blame for something that was his fault, she had done it several times already. Naruto was not sure what it was about, but was surprised at how submissive and accommodating Kyuubi was. Of course, he knew that there was much about the woman that he didn't know. Hell, he hadn't even known she was a woman until they met. He tightened his grip when Kyuubi tried to pull away. Don't, I can tell from how your legs are wobbling that standing on your own is out of the question. Kyuubi looked like she was about to start struggling again, but Naruto brought his other hand up to her cheek. The feel of his warm and calloused hand delicately touching her cheek brought an unusual amount of comfort, so much that Kyuubi didn't even notice when she started leaning into the hand. A thumb lightly ran across one of her whisker marks, causing her to suck in a breath. Opening her eyes, and wondering when she had closed them in the first place, Kyuubi noticed a pair of Rinnegan orbs staring back at her. The genjutsu must have dispelled when he released his power, she thought absently, before her mind was taken away from the small observation by the sound of Naruto's voice. Despite what you say, this is my fault. Naruto let his thumb run along Kyuubi's cheek, caressing her whisker marks a bit more. Kyuubi blushed a bit as a low moan escaped her throat. If I have to, I will make it an order. Kyuubi sighed, knowing that with her master's stubborn nature he would. She wouldn't admit it, even to herself, but she was thankful for his compassionate nature. Demons rarely ever showed compassion, many even felt that it was a weakness. Even Raizen-sama had rarely ever showed compassion, though he had on rare occasion. Very well, Naruto-sama, Kyuubi said. Naruto nodded before they turned to look at Hekasi, who was just now coming out of his stupor. Looks like we've got some explaining to do, Naruto muttered with a loud sigh. Kyuubi just nodded in agreement. Naruto jumped back just as the Orangora smashed into the ground he had previously been on. Chunks of dirt were launched into the air as the large creature's fist struck the ground. The large ape-like creature howled as it missed, beating its massive fist against its chest. Naruto smirked. While the Orangora was fairly powerful, in fact, its power was easily on par with that of a B-rank demon, it was slow and stupid, which lowered its classification to that of a C rank. The blonde thrust out his hand, a giant black claw made of his yuki extending from it. The claw latched onto the giant ape, pinning its arms to its chest. With a roar worthy of any demon king, Naruto lifted the demon off its feet and flung it into the air. He watched as the creature flew higher and higher, waiting until the large ape reached the apex of its flight before striking. Jumping up after it, Naruto created another claw and used the Orangora's weight and the world's gravity against it, throwing it back down to the earth. The creature was smashed into the ground, creating a large crater as dirt and gravel was kicked up. The ground under it cracked and large fissures spread out from the center of the creature's impact. From where Naruto was almost floating in the sky, the entire crater looked like a large spiderweb. Naruto landed on the ground just as the creature was getting back up. It moved on wobbly legs, looking for all the world like it had just gone 300 rounds with a world-class boxer and lost, badly. It took a while, but eventually, the beast managed to regain whatever wits it had. The blonde grinned as the beast let out a roar, ready for round 2, and charged at him, attempting to smash into him with its body. However, Naruto had no intention of letting the lumbering creature hit him and nimbly leapt out of the way, much to the ape's frustration. Soon the blonde demon began to play a game of weaving in between the creature's attacks, always making sure to stay out of the creature's reach. This seemed to make Ape Demon increasingly frustrated, and eventually, it seemed to lose whatever composure it had. The Orangoras let out a loud roar, its hands smashed into the ground hard enough that it managed to bury the two appendages several feet into the coarse earth. With a great heave, it lifted a large chunk of rocky gravel, then hurled it straight towards Naruto with the intent of having the earthen projectile smack into him. Naruto held out his hand. The appendage had taken on an L shape, with his middle, ring, and pinky fingers were curled as if making a fist, and his index finger was pointed at the ape demon with his thumb sticking up in the air. A small black ball of energy began forming on the tip of his finger, crackling and sparking with barely suppressed power. Bang! The energy ball tore into the chunk of earth, ripping it asunder and continuing on to the Orangora, blasting a chunk through it too. The giant ape roared, this time in pain as the demonic energy from Naruto not only tore a hole straight through its chest, but also began burning around at the edges. The hole hissed and steamed as layers of skin continued melting off the Orangora like someone had sprayed acid on the wound. Naruto knew the truth about what was happening. Kyuubi had informed him early on that Naruto's Yuki was poisonous to those who weren't strong enough to withstand it, and the blonde demon shinobi had used that to his advantage. Several of the times he had battled the demons on this plane he had merely killed them via poisoning their system with his power. Naruto used a quick shundo, the speed technique Kyuubi had taught to him, to appear on the creature's head with a loud boom, one hand pointed palm down at the large gorilla's head, the other holding onto the pointed hand's wrist. Boom! A large blast of black energy launched out of Naruto's hand, bathing the creature in its light, or lack thereof, as it were. In a few seconds the entire Oringuera was obliterated, not even ashes of the creature were left. Naruto grinned as he put his hands in his pockets and made his way towards Kyuubi, who was overseeing the training his Kage Bunshin were doing. "So how was that?" asked Naruto, his voice changing from its regal demonic tone to a normal voice as his Yuki left his system. "Not bad," Kyuubi replied, a small smirk on her face as she stopped watching and helping the clones to face him. "You're a little cocky when you fight and tend to make a game out of it, but I suppose considering who you are it can't be helped." Naruto pouted. "Yeah well, when I fight an opponent who requires me to take them seriously I will." A sly grin crossed his face as he saddled up to Kyuubi, an arm snaking around her waist. "Besides, with all these awesome techniques and powers you're teaching me, I doubt there is any demon alive who could put up a decent fight." Kyuubi blushed a bit, but quickly frowned and stepped out of Naruto's grasp. Naruto, frustrated from being snubbed so many times by now that he had lost count, barely managed to restrain his growl. "Why do you keep resisting, Kyuubi?" he asked. Despite his voice being calm, there was a hint of frustration. I don't know what you're talking about," Kyuubi replied, turning away so he couldn't see her face. This time Naruto did growl. "Don't give me that. You know very well what I'm talking about. Is there something wrong with me? Am I not attractive enough for you? Or do you not like me because I was once human?" "No," Kyuubi shouted as she turned to him, her eyes wide in shock. "No," she repeated, her voice softer, "there's nothing wrong with you, I just—" "Then what it is?" Naruto asked as he closed the distance between them. "Have I done something wrong? I know we haven't known each other that long." Naruto paused here. "Well, I guess you've known me for a while now, huh?" He stopped when he heard Kyuubi's sob. He moved to comfort her but she quickly moved away, taking several steps from the blonde, before whirling on him. "That's just it," she said, tears leaking out of her eyes. "I've known you for a long time, longer than anyone else. I was sealed into you the moment you were born for Kami's sake. I know of almost everything that happened to you. She stifled another sob. "I watched as you went your entire life without anyone but a few people caring about you, and even they were only passing by, never staying long enough to truly help. I saw all the beatings you've ever gone through, like watching a movie. Every time you went to the hospital in critical condition I was there. I saw." She paused, unsure whether she should continue or not but plunged on anyway. "I saw when you tried to end it." Naruto stiffened. He was not surprised that she knew about his beatings. While they had been rare, only happening once in a blue moon, they had happened. Usually he would get beaten while running afoul of a drunken villager. He lived in the red light district so there were quite a few of them wandering around late at night. He had learned early on not to stay out after dark when he was younger. But to hear that she had seen him in his greatest moment of weakness was shocking, even though he knew it shouldn't have been. It had been when he was 6 years old. He had just started the academy and couldn't have been happier, since he felt he would finally get to prove to everyone just how awesome he was. Several people had not liked the thought of the demon getting stronger, and he had received his first true beating that day, the kind where he was sent to the hospital half dead and forced on life support for several days despite Kyuubi healing him. It had been after he had left the academy when it happened. The blonde had reached the red light district where a group of disgruntled villagers had been waiting. They had muffled him and taken him into an alley where they proceeded to beat the life out of him. He didn't know how long the beating had lasted, or even who had been doing the beating. Consciousness had faded in and out before the pain had become too much and he had passed out altogether. He hadn't known what happened after that, but did remember waking up in the hospital attached to a life support system. A month after that he had lost it, not being able to stand the glares, the new and harsher beatings when drunks caught him. Naruto had attempted to commit suicide. He had taken a kunai knife and slit his throat. Only for his throat to heal nearly instantaneously. He had tried his wrists and ended up getting the same thing. As a desperate last gamble Naruto had pierced his heart. He was not sure how he had survived that. "It was you, wasn't it?" Naruto asked in a low voice. "You were the one who had kept me from dying that day." Kyuubi nodded her head. All these things that had happened to you were because of me, because I was sealed inside you." She turned away again. "But that's not even the worst part. The worst was that I didn't save you out of some noble desire to keep you alive. I saved you so that you would suffer, so that I could get some form of revenge on you. Even though, Like me, you had no choice in being my host. Someone like me, someone who has caused you so much pain and relished in it, doesn't deserve to have you." Naruto closed his eyes and sighed. Opening them again, Naruto walked over to the sobbing vixen, wrapping her up in his arms. Kyuubi struggled a bit, but with her waning strength and Naruto's immense physical condition there was no contest between them. Eventually her body gave out and sagged into him, tears coming out of her anew. "Baka," Naruto said, one of his hands reaching out and caressing her hair. "That was years ago, and while I don't like hearing that you wanted me to suffer, I can understand how you were feeling. I can't say if I would have done the same or not, but who can unless they're placed in a similar situation. Everyone would like to say things like, 'I would never do that,' and, 'What a horrible thing to do,' but in truth, no one could ever truly know how they'd react until they're put in a similar situation." What about before you met me?" Kyuubi asked with a slight hiccup. It was very odd seeing the most powerful of the 9 demon lords break down like this. Naruto may have only known her for a time, but he knew enough to know that crying like this would be seen as a sign of weakness, and one that Kyuubi herself was likely to scorn were anyone else doing so. He wondered if she would still cry for him if he were still human. "Probably not. Hugh, I didn't even know about you until 3 months ago," Naruto said in an amused voice. "Sure, I may have placed a slight blame on you when I first learned about the ceiling, but that was overshadowed by my desire to prove I wasn't you. I never really took the time to place blame on anyone, not my parents, and certainly not you." Kyuubi sniffled a bit as she buried herself deeper in his chest, reassured by Naruto's words. She still felt horrible, and in some ways, her master's forgiveness made her feel even worse. She had watched and relished in his suffering, drinking in the agony that a 6-year-old child had gone through like a fine wine, all for the sake of her misguided hatred. Yet Naruto had forgiven her, the person who had caused his suffering, and enjoyed it. His forgiveness of her just made her feel even more guilty. And yet, beyond that guilt, Kyuubi felt the stirrings of hope. That maybe, just maybe, if she helped Naruto and did all in her power to protect him, then she would be able to earn the forgiveness he had given her. Forgiveness that she didn't deserve. "What about the villagers?" she asked after several seconds of silence. Naruto chuckled. "I may not blame them for the ceiling, after all there was nothing they could do about it one way or the other." Naruto sighed as he placed his chin on top of Kyuubi's head, letting it rest there as he continued. "That doesn't mean I don't blame them for how my life has been because of them. They abused an innocent child for crimes he did not commit, for something beyond his control. They didn't even take the time to get to know me, simply believing that I was a demon given human form." Naruto chuckled at the irony of that statement. In some ways, he guessed the villagers had been right. They had just mixed him up with the wrong demon. And while I'm not going to stoop to their level and go out of my way to make their lives miserable, I'm not going to put up with their crap anymore either. They want to try something with me, they better be prepared for the consequences and the pain of me breaking my foot off in there." Kyuubi gave a small giggle that was somewhat stifled by her face being buried in Naruto's well-developed pectorals. "That's good. I don't think I could have put up with another minute of that simpering and submissive attitude you used to have." "Ouch," Naruto said, mocking a wince. "You could have put that a little more nicely." He grinned. "In any case, I'm just glad I'm not an overly conscious bleeding heart like a certain vixen I know. Who would have thought the great Kyuubi no Yoko was such a crybaby?" Naruto winced a bit as Kyuubi's nails elongated into claws and dug into his back, but for the most part ignored the slight pain. He pushed her back a bit, looking at her tear-stained face, bringing a hand up and wiping off the few remaining tears. "So are we gonna cry and moan about things that aren't true and don't matter anymore?" Naruto asked. Kyuubi shook her head and smiled. "You'd better be careful with that attitude around me." "Ooh, a threat," Naruto said in mock fear before smirking. "I'll take that as a yes. And in that case, we need some way to seal your promise not to cry about things you can't control." Kyuubi blinked at him and tilted her head curiously. "What do you mean, MMMPH?" Kyuubi was cut off as Naruto smashed his lips against hers. The redhead's eyes went wide for all of 1 second before they fluttered closed. Acting almost on instinct, Kyuubi pressed her lips against the blonde's even harder, eliciting a slight grunt from the blonde. One of her hands ended up going to the back of Naruto's neck while the other buried itself in his hair. Kyuubi moaned at the feeling of Naruto's lips against hers. They were surprisingly soft, not something she would have expected from the blonde. Soft and moist, and in Kyuubi's humble opinion, perfect. Opening her mouth, the vixen allowed Naruto to slip his tongue in between her teeth and deepen the kiss. Kyuubi's tongue came out to meet his as they began to duel and danced around each other. Kyuubi's experience won out and Naruto let her explore the inside of his mouth. Her tongue ran over his teeth, feeling the increased length of his canines. It went to his roof, licked along his inner cheeks. The red-haired demoness left no part of the blonde's mouth unexplored. Eventually, Kyuubi's tongue retracted, allowing Naruto to the same to her. When breathing became a must, the two broke away. What was that for? Asked a completely dazed Kyuubi, her eyes half lidded with lust. Naruto grinned at her expression. Why, we were sealing our promise, of course. You're not going to feel guilty about what happened to me anymore, remember? Kyuubi looked up at him with a cute expression of confusion on her face. She shook her head and gave a sly smile. I think we need to try again, just so I remember our promise more clearly. Naruto chuckled before leaning back down and capturing Kyuubi's lips again. Loud explosions and the sound of battle filled one of the dead forests of Makai. The feeling of raw power emanating from the forest was enough to drive off even some of the bravest or dumbest of demons. It was a very smart thing for them to do, all things considered. After all, getting in between a battle between the most powerful of the 9 demon lords and the heir and descendant of the greatest demon king to ever exist was not a wise move. Naruto grunted as he jumped away from another of Kyuubi's energy blasts, this one hitting close enough to sing his clothes. There was a slight pull on his yuki as they repaired themselves a moment later. He had never been so thankful that his clothes had the ability to repair themselves. Just thinking about the amount of money he would save from having to get new clothes each time he destroyed another pair, which he could feel was going to be a very frequent occurrence, was enough to make him smile. He would have to thank Hekase for them later. Looking up, Naruto saw another energy blast heading his way. He charged all the energy he could into one of his fists and, as the ball of red yuki got closer, smashed his fist into it. For a moment the ball of energy and Naruto's own power struggled in a battle for dominance. With a loud roar, Naruto shoved more power into his hand and pushed. The ball of yuki caved in where Naruto's fist was for a moment, before getting launched into the air. When it was several thousand meters high, Naruto sent an energy blast at it, creating a large explosion that could no doubt be seen for miles. The blonde had no time to celebrate, however, as Naruto's instincts began screaming at him. Acting on them, he jumped to the side just in time to dodge a giant claw of yuki. Creating his own yuki claw, Naruto grabbed onto the red claw of energy and yanked. He was rewarded when Kyuubi came flying out of the forest, head first and towards him. He jumped up to meet her, his fist already charged with yuki, the black energy making it impossible to see said appendage. Just as he brought his fist down, Kyuubi phased out of existence with nothing more than a sonic boom to signify her moving, having used the demon speed technique Shundo to get away. Naruto's fist ended up hitting a tree, destroying it and the 7 behind it as well as creating a large trench in the ground. Landing on the ground, Naruto went into a roll, dodging the red beam of energy that Kyuubi shot from one of her tails. He had learned early on that Kyuubi's tails were actually the most dangerous part of her body. With them she could launch energy blasts anywhere she wanted, and was not limited by not being able to see where she sent them. That, and the fact that she had 9 of them meant she could send a near continuous stream of energy when she wanted to. Kipping up on the balls of his feet, Naruto spun around and held out his hand, palm pointed towards the sky. Several reddish-black discs appeared above his hand. They looked like a spinning hacksaw, with razor-sharp, jagged edges that looked like they would be incredibly painful if they cut into your flesh. Naruto placed his hand on the top one and began throwing them at Kyuubi, one after the other in quick succession. Before they could hit the red-haired vixen, Kyuubi began to weave her tails in a complex pattern as she charged them with yukai, creating an energy shield that caused the attacks to explode harmlessly in front of her. However, Naruto used the distraction it afforded him and shundoed right in front of her, his leg crackling with an ominous black glow as it descended on her. Kyuubi merely sidestepped the kick, using her arm and yuki to redirect the blast away from her and knock Naruto off balance. Naruto stumbled and Kyuubi capitalized on his momentary weakness, smashing a yuki-covered fist into his face. Naruto went flying backwards for nearly 100 feet, smashing through multiple trees before rolling to a stop just a few feet from a small lake. He blinked several times as he tried to get the spots out of his eyes, all the while wondering why his head was ringing. As he lay there panting, Kyuubi came up and leaned over him with a victorious smirk. "Yeah, go on, gloat as much as you can now," Naruto panted, trying his best to give her a glare. Considering how much his head hurt, it was less effective than it could have. It would be a good idea to take what bragging rights you can before it's out of your reach. Kyuubi just shook her head, her smirk still in place. "Do you think I would be so cruel as to brag about how I kicked your 6 ways to Sunday?" Yes I do," Naruto said with a grunt as he felt the last of his wounds and burns heal. Sitting up, the blonde shook his head to clear it. He could distinctly hear ringing in his ear. "Who would I brag to?" Kyuubi asked as she held out a hand to help Naruto up. "After all, until you have the strength to claim your throne, I'm basically sworn to secrecy." Naruto looked at the hand and grabbed onto it, but instead of letting Kyuubi pull him up, he yanked on it and pulled her down. He watched with amusement as her eyes widened, and just as she crashed into him, Naruto wrapped his arms around her waist. Rolling over, Naruto grinned victoriously as he looked down at the red-haired vixen he was now straddling. I suppose that's true, Naruto mused, though it will probably worse if you bragged after I took Raizen Ojisan's place. Well then, I suppose you'll just have to convince me to stay quiet, Kyuubi replied in a purring voice. Naruto grinned and began to lean in when, grag, both Naruto and Kyuubi were forced to roll off each other and jump out of the way as several globs of acid splashed against where they had been laying. Oi, who the hell do you assholes think you are? I was just about to. Naruto trailed off and eyed the odd-looking creatures warily. The things were bent down on all fours and had a large pair of arms coming out of their backs. They had black leathery-looking skin covering most of their bodies except for a few parts that were red and showed off muscle, and their face, which was an off-white color. A few of them had masks on, and while Naruto was not sure, he had a hunch that they increased the creature's size since the ones with the mask were at least twice as large as the ones without. All in all, they were some of the ugliest things he had ever seen. There were 50 in all. Nobodies, Kyuubi commented as she made eye contact with him. Naruto dodged another stream of acid before grabbing one of the creatures with a Yuki claw and crushing it like it was made of clay. He tossed the corpse into several of the others, knocking them down with how hard he threw it. Nobodies, Naruto asked, curiosity in his tone. Is that what these things are called? Kyuubi nodded as one of the masked nobodies leapt at her. She jumped to the side, before shooting a red beam of Yuki into it, destroying the mask along with most of its head. The beast continued sailing through the air in a slow arch, before hitting the ground a meter away and skidding for several more feet before coming to a stop. It was dead before it hit the ground. Yep, Kyuubi answered. No one could ever figure out a name for these things, so that's what we called them. They're fairly easy to kill, but can be annoying since they have the ability to suck out your demonic energy with a dance. A dance? Naruto nearly laughed as an image of these things starting to break dance came to his mind. It was honestly the stupidest thing he had ever seen and amused him to no end. Maybe he should keep one as a pet to amuse him. Don't underestimate them, Kyuubi warned Naruto as her tails shot out, red Yuki extending from them and impaling 4 of the nobodies. They may not be hard to kill, but they are still annoying and persistent. Naruto grunted non-comically, yeah, I got ya. Naruto smirked as one of the creatures lunged at him. He dodged the side and grabbed its head, releasing an energy blast in one go that destroyed the entire creature. Still, it shouldn't be too hard to kill them, Naruto said. With the 2 of us it shouldn't take more than a few minutes at the most. Kyuubi caught Naruto's eye and smirked. The one who destroys the most wins. Naruto's grin said it all. That's right, the wages are one of us spending the entire week devoting themselves to the other. Ah, but I'm already devoted to you, Naruto-sama, Kyuubi said as she wiped out a few more with several swipes of her now clawed hands. Naruto hummed in thought. Well then, how about I devote myself to you for a week if I lose, and you will have to wear a naughty maid outfit whenever we're at home. Kyuubi blushed at the thought of wearing something like that in front of her Naruto-sama. It sounded kinky. Deal.